Hola, ¿qué tal, amigos? My name is Florian and you are listening to podcast Świat Okiem Biegacza. I hope you are not from Poland, so I'm especially happy that you are listening to this podcast. This podcast is about running, but most episodes are in Polish, so it will be tough for you to know what we are talking about in last episodes, but I have also 2 episodes which I have recorded in English. It is 77th episode with Jake Smith and it is 54th with Mike Fopen. So I invite you to listen to this episode. Today I bring you Thijs Nijhuis, the great runner from Denmark who participated in Olympics in marathon in Tokyo. His philosophy of running is really, really nice. I have learned so much from him. So I really recommend you to listen to this episode because it's really mind-changing, it can be. So there are some 2 more stuff I want to add. If you find this episode valuable, please share it on Instagram, please comment it on YouTube. I will be so grateful if you do that. And second thing, I have Patronite. So if you want to support me financially, you can go to patronite.pl and you can support me financially. And I bring you my today's guest and 1 hour of really, really nice talk. Hi guys, it's English episode again. My name is Florian and you are listening to podcast Świat Okiem Biegacza. Today my guest is Thijs Nijhuis. Thijs, I'm so happy that you are on my show. Thanks for accepting invitation. And if you can introduce yourself, who are you and why runners should know your name?
First of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. It's the first time in a Polish podcast, so that would be interesting. So yeah, as you mentioned, my name is Thijs Nijhuis. I'm 29 years old, coming out of Denmark, living in the second biggest city. It's called Aarhus, where I study medicine, next to running a lot of kilometers. So I think my PBs may be a good thing. Runners are always interested in stats. My 1500 is 3:43, 3K 7:58, 5K 13:43, 10K 28:38, half marathon 62:46, and finally my marathon is 2:10:57, which I qualified for the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, even though it was held in 2021.
Okay, you talk about your results, and what result are your, the best and you are really proud of it? Is it a marathon or maybe 5K, because 5K is a Denmark national record? So what result are you the most proud of?
Yeah, actually the 5K record was taken off me yesterday in Monaco. Axel Wang beat my record by 5 or 6 seconds, so I'll have to take it back. But I think throughout my career there are a lot of races that I'm really proud of when I ran it, even though they might not be faster than what I ran now. At that time, they were really good for the level I was at, so I think it's very important to keep that in mind, that there can be a lot of victories and successes throughout the road. It's not all dependent on what time you end up running. But for now, it's definitely my marathon, the 2:10:57, also because it qualified me for the Olympics, and just all the hard work that went into that marathon, and being able to run down the finish line in Seville the last 30-40 seconds knowing you're going to go to the Olympics. We in Denmark didn't have more than 3 qualified, so I knew I was good to go. And yeah, that was definitely an emotional moment for me.
How do you remember the Olympics? Because I think that the dreams come true, but I think that maybe the atmosphere was not like always. The atmosphere was quite different. But how do you remember the Tokyo? How do you remember the Olympics?
It was definitely a big dream for me. I mean, it's one of those things you say when you're 16 and you don't know what it truly means. But it takes a lot of hard work for many years, and as it was my first Olympics, I didn't have too many other Olympics to compare to. So obviously it was a little bit of a flat feeling having no spectators there at all, really. And we were pretty locked up prior. We couldn't go out and see anything. I've been to a country without being there, I usually say, because I know absolutely I haven't seen anything of Japan, not even like a coffee shop, nothing. So, I mean, I didn't want to be, I mean, it still was the Olympics. I still went to run against the best athletes in the world, and I'm really proud of that. But it certainly has me motivated to try to make another Olympic team just so I can see or get the full experience with spectators and all. But we could expect to be really rough with the qualifying for next time. So yeah, maybe 2.7, 2.8.
So next plan is Paris and 2024, and your main goal is just to train for the next Olympics, or you just have plans for this year or another one?
A runner has always plans, I would say, at this level. So as later of this month, if everything goes well and I don't get COVID, that's one of the uncertainties here in life at the moment. I will do the Las Vegas half marathon, the 27th of February. And then I will be doing the Rotterdam Marathon on the 10th of April. As I'm already qualified for the World Championship in Eugene later on, the mid of July, that will be the main focus of the year. And then we'll see what happens in the fall. But definitely World Championships, Eugene, and we'll see whether I make it to Europeans or not afterwards, depending on how the race goes in the US.
I have to say that you start very often in the US, because last November you participated in New York Marathon. Just a couple months after Olympics, you ran 2 hours and 17 seconds, 17 minutes. Yeah, 17 seconds. It will be perfect. But how do you remember? And is that something special for you about the US, or just maybe they pay more, they pay very much money, and that's the reason why you are going so often to US?
I wish it was the last part of the story with all the money coming in. That's unfortunately not the way it is. No, it's really the first one. I went to college in the US from 2011 to 2014. So I think I got a pretty special connection with the US, and also I think, I mean, as a marathon runner, being able to start in a world major marathon as New York is, that's something you should take advantage of. And the New York Marathon just was really, really good at hosting it. The organizers were extremely good, and they made sure that we felt great. They even decided to bring my wife over, which was really special to me to share that moment with her. I think that's a very good job by the New York Marathon Elite Athletes Federation, and also it's truly magic. New York, if you only were to do one marathon ever in your life, it's definitely New York. The atmosphere, when you start at the Verrazano Bridge, you run uphill for 1.5 km, and then you look left and you can see the skyline of Manhattan, and you have to go all the way in there. 40K later, you enter Central Park from the side, and these green trees and all the crowds just cheering on you. It's very amazing. You shouldn't do it as your first one, because you might just be disappointed afterwards with all other races, because there's nothing that can compare to New York. It's truly special, and I can only recommend it to everybody.
Wow, I thought like maybe my first marathon should be in Valencia, but you recommend me this marathon, so I know that one day definitely I will go there. So maybe just to start, if you can just introduce how did it happen that you started running, because when I think about Denmark, okay, I think about Kipketer, yeah, but then I think about football, maybe like that, and I don't think about many sports. So how did it happen that you become a runner?
Yeah, the football, that's where I started as well, so that's correct. We are also a big nation within handball, but I never tried that, and also quite good at swimming. And
Yeah,
I think
because
we have the world.
I know Denmark was playing with Poland several times, and I remember that Denmark handballers were really strong, and the matches with Poles and Denmark were always very interesting and funny to watch.
Yeah, and also we have the Olympic champion in the badminton, Victor Axelsen. So we're pretty good at that sport as well. But yeah, started as playing soccer. I think a lot of boys do. Quite quickly, my coach saw that I was better without the ball than with the ball, which is an issue when you play soccer. I also found out myself that I found it more interesting to warm up around the field, running away from the other people, than actually playing soccer. So I decided to change to track and field. As one of my friends said, come and join us. And I did a shot put and a long jump. And it was all rubbish. But at the end of each practice, we were doing like 6x200 or something. And this is where I really, like, the first two, they were like, everybody could keep up with me. I was like, oh, they're really good. But then I could feel like number 3, 4, 5, I was really strong and I could hold the pace, whereas the other people started dying. So yeah, that got me into running, and since then I've done it because I really think it suits me. I really wanted to win, and I also would probably be really bad at losing games, and I think it was good that I did an individual sport, so I had nobody but myself to blame.
And how do you remember your junior career? Because when I saw your results, you ran quite well, because 3:43 on 500 meters, it's quite good result. But it's pretty far, to be the best runner on 1 mile. So was it for you tough, to accept that you were not the best runner on 1 mile and you have to just run longer distances?
Yeah, definitely always liked the longer distances more. I liked going out for my Sunday long run. Even when I was 16 years old, I probably went for 2 hours nearly, just because I liked it through the forest, didn't think about time, just enjoyed it. And I think my coach really emphasized on having me doing the 1500 and the 5K for a long time, just because he said you need the speed, you need to wait so it doesn't become a limitation for you in the road running later on. And even though I might have been pushing a little bit to move to the road races, he once in a while, when the season was kind of over or before the season started track, he would let me run a half marathon before and after, and then I was happy. And then he could keep me at the track for as compromise with the coach and athlete. And also, I mean, I think when I started, I was beaten by a couple of girls. And I decided to train really hard when I was 15, 16, because I didn't want that to happen again. I wanted to do really well, and I qualified when I was 17 for the Europeans under 18 and also for the under 20s, which, I mean, I didn't do great at these championships, but it was a really good motivation, and I wanted to experience making a championship again. And also, I might have been the best in Denmark in my age back 17, 18, but then I went to college in the US, and there's like 300 people who were better than me. So I think that was a good eye-opener. And one of the reasons I became the athlete I am today.
So I have to ask you about studying in US, because lots of Polish guys go to US from New York, maybe not. I wanted to maybe from Miami to San Francisco. And how do you remember that time? Because there's so many guys who are coming without graduating, they studied there, but I think like almost 99% of people who are going there, they are very, very happy that they came there. Okay, maybe not about studying, not about the all things we think about when we think about studies, but they're happy about atmosphere, they're happy that they speak English fluently. So what's your opinion about that time?
After high school, I decided to go to Eastern Kentucky University, and the same things you were mentioning. I mean, the atmosphere with running was just completely different. With cross country, it was suddenly a team event, and that was really motivating to run with like 15, 20 guys each day. And I didn't come from a club where we had a lot of people. Like even if we put all of the Danish national youth elite together, we probably wouldn't be 15 guys, and we would have 12 different coaches, and it would be really hard. So it was really good just being 15, 20 guys together and training under the same coach. I mean, there's nothing in the world that's perfect, so obviously it wouldn't suit everybody, but I also was really happy with the friends I made, and also becoming better in English, and it was just a really, really professional setup. And we had, like, even to the day today, I pay for my physio now, and in the US the physio was for free, and I could go to the physio from 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening. And I also ended up meeting my wife, who I married last year. So yeah, for me, it's personally been very good experience. So definitely, and I stayed for 2.5 years because I knew I couldn't transfer anything towards my medical degree. But there's nothing that's ever wasted, even though the studies might be a little bit wasted. I mean, I still gain a lot of knowledge about the US and what it would be to study abroad.
And your wife is from Denmark or from US?
She's actually from Norway, but one of her parents are from Denmark, so we live together in Denmark now.
And what did you study in US? Because I think like studying medicine is like almost impossible in USA.
Yeah, so basically it's a little bit different. When we go to university in Denmark, you go straight into the medical study after high school. In the US, you do a bachelor and then you go to medical school. So with the bachelor, I studied pre-medicine, so it should prepare you for medicine with a tint of biology. So yeah, it was fine. I ended up doing a couple of classes. I probably wasn't the most ambitious student because I knew I couldn't transfer it all, but I still had pretty good grades and I enjoyed learning about the different things. So I could definitely, it was a good way to me to figure out whether I liked classes like anatomy and physiology before trying it or going into medical school at home. So in that way, it made up my mind for what to study later on.
And also interesting topic for me is how did you manage to train with other guys? Because as you told me that there were so many guys who were running, and I think like the level of them were just completely different. And for one of them, maybe easy runs were 5 minutes per K. For others, it was 4 minutes per K. The same with tempo runs. So how did you manage, to run as your told you so? And did it, have some topics and some stuff where not you were not accepted that, and you were just nervous that you are training not the way you should be?
Yeah, it's always a compromise. I mean, as great as it is to have such a big group, I mean, you can't expect to be the one feeling great every day. You have people suddenly, some days they will feel good and you will feel bad. And on those days, I think it became very important not to kill each other, but try to help each other. And I think that's where I learned that I couldn't cover every move that everybody did because I would just burn out. So I think I learned a lot about myself and my training, and that you should respect that not every day is a day where you should go out and blow yourself up. So in that regard, I learned that you should think what is the purpose of this training today, and I still do today, and how do I get around it. And obviously sometimes it's good to have friends that are fast and they can push you, but it needs to be on the right days. It shouldn't be on the easy days. So accept it and don't be stressed by everybody else. It can be really hard when you're at big championships because everybody looks good. Everybody who are there are good because, otherwise they wouldn't be there. But I think I learned a lot from that, being in the US with so many good people the entire time and just trying to focus on myself. It seems cliche to say, but it's the process and thinking about how you as a person or you as a runner become better, not who you can beat in training. Nobody is rewarded with a medal for training faster than somebody else. It's at race day it matters.
Yeah, I really like what you have just said, that, what is the purpose of today's training? Because sometimes I feel like I want every day just to train as hard as I can, and then, you know, the race comes and I have no strength to run. And do you see the difference of your perception of running, of training through, you know, the time you are training? Because I think like you are training over, I don't know, 15 years, yeah, something like that. So how did your perception of running has changed through this time?
Yeah, I mean, if I look back at my training diaries, when I was 18, I did some of the same workouts I do now as a 29-year-old, 8 by 1K, and I probably do the same pace. I still do 2:58 3 minutes. The only thing that's different is I went from running 31 minutes to 28 minutes in a 10K. So yes, obviously you should push once in a while, but I think my coach always tell me everybody can train hard. Like most people can train really hard and do 200Ks a week, but it's the one who dares to take time to recover and who can absorb the training who will at the end of the day become the best athlete and run the fastest. I found a way of training that worked for me. It's a lot of mileage. It's a lot of kilometers between half marathon pace and marathon pace, and not so much faster than that. So I'm nearly always able to talk to people when I run. I don't try to kill myself because I knew tomorrow is another day. And some people are more, if you train for 1500, the training is definitely different. So it also depends on who you are and what your temper is about. If you're a guy that hates doing long runs, if a coach tells you to run a long run 3 times a week, you'll quit in a year. So you gotta make sure that the coach balances the workouts accordingly to what motivates the person, because it doesn't matter whether you train for a year and continuously if the person or athlete stops in a year or two. So there is no right and wrong training. At the end of the day, it is about keeping yourself injury free and staying in it for a long time and daring to let go. And the last couple of days before races, I don't think about pace. The day before my marathon in Seville, I ran 2:10. I ran 7K at 3:45. People would say that's too fast, but I didn't look at my watch. I just ran. I felt good. Other times I'll run 4 minutes 45. So, and I've become better. It takes a lot of years to get to that stage. You should have asked me this question 6 years ago, and you would have gotten a definitely completely different answer.
Yeah, so I'm interested what will you answer, you know, in 10 years. So I think like also the answer will be different. And you know, you have such a wisdom in running, and it is really, really nice to hear. And can you tell us just more about your coach and how long are you training with him?
So I basically only had 2 coaches my entire life. I started with the coach when I was 13, 14, and I had him until I left for the US. I obviously had a coach in the US a little bit as well, but that was for the entire group. And then when I came back to Denmark in 2014, I joined the coach I'm with now. For 8 years I'm with him, and he was a 3:36 runner himself back in the 80s, and he's made European final in the 1500 against Cram and Co and Oved, the British trio, and he's also run 13:34, so he's still faster than me in the 5K, which is slightly annoying because you would think I should be able to beat that time, but he's he knows a lot, and he sees himself more as a coach than a trainer. A trainer would tell you what to do. We talk about what we're going to do, and he always asks me when he writes me a training plan, what do you think of this? Is there anything you would like to change? Is there anything we should talk about? And even though we agree on the plan, maybe sometimes halfway through a build-up something goes not accordingly to plan, and you should be able to discuss with your coach about it and act accordingly to it, because a training plan is always only tentative. You need to be able to adapt, and that's very important. You can't just always do what's in the program.
Wow, it's a really interesting cooperation, because it's first time I have heard something like that. Like your coach is just, you know, it's just an idea of training, and you do not have to stick with that. And also, when I watch you on Sweat Elite, it is like your coach does not tell you what rest should be between like some runs. So like you should know what rest do you want. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's very correct. I think he says like if for some workouts, I mean, sometimes he will be more precise, but a lot of the times when I do, for example, 10 by 1K, he says, well, maybe you stand still for 1 minute, maybe you walk for 1 minute, maybe you jog for 1 minute, maybe you jog for 1.5 minutes. I mean, he says it's up to the days. He says it's more important to spend, like if I'm really tired, and what helps me through the workout is that I walk instead of jog for 1 minute. He says maybe that's the better way for that day. I mean, we can't expect or predict what the weather is going to be. We can't predict how I feel. And I always think that when you train really, really hard, especially running 200K weeks, maybe people say, oh, you should do this at your half marathon pace. But maybe my half marathon pace when I'm training really hard, I mean, on paper it's 2:58. But when I'm running 200, that's when I'm fresh, in a race, everything feels good. So maybe if I would go do half marathon pace today, maybe I could go run maybe 3:03 for a half marathon. And should you be training accordingly to what you can run on the perfect day, or should you be training to what you could do on today's training? Especially also in Poland, I mean, the weather these days, I mean, you can't just do what's on the program. Sometimes you got to be flexible, and yeah, the same with the rest. I mean, sometimes when I do longer repeats, 3 by 5K, my coach is like, sometimes if you want to jog for a K, good. If you want to walk for 3 minutes, it's also fine. It's not too much about the breaks. It's more about getting the proper effort in. That he says if walking 1 minute helps you run better the next 5K, that's what we go for. That's more important. The workout is not the breaks.
Yeah, but it's easy to talk about that. But I know that runners like to be sticked with the plan. They don't like to be flexible, and I think it's really we have a pressure like, okay, we run 10 times 1K, so we have to stick with the same time, and we don't think about, as you told, like the weather condition, and maybe we did not sleep well. So were you always like that, or you just discovered that, and through your coach, like you have to be flexible and you have to think in what condition is your body?
Yeah, so I think obviously, I mean, it's not that I'm not thinking about the pace. If he puts on a pace, let's say last week we did a 10K tempo and he put down 3:06. So I think, okay, I'll try to go and see if I can run 3:06. But I know the first 5K were a strong headwind. So I was like, okay, I'll be sensible. I'll try to see if I can run 3:06 for the entire workout. So the first 5K would be 3:10, 3:11, and try to feel the rhythm. And then once I turned, I tried, okay, just stay in the same rhythm. And suddenly it was 3:03, 3:04, and I was like, perfect. So I can go a little bit faster in the tailwind than in the headwind. And I mean, I think it comes with maturity, it comes with age, it comes with a lot of racing. And also being flexible it's necessary, because no races will go exactly according to plan. No races will be exactly 3:06s the entire way. You'll have some case 3:08, you'll have some case 3:02. That's depending on if it's headwind, tailwind, what people in the group wants. So you should try to simulate that a little bit in training once in a while. And also now in the winter we do fartlegs, and it's basically we do it every 2 or 3 weeks. We are 5 or 6 guys, and we each have 5 minutes in the lead. And the only rule is that you can't pass the one in front of you. So I could go and say, I push 5 minutes all I can. But then the next guy was like, oh, Thijs pushed very hard. Then he can jog for 5 minutes. He could also say, I jog for 2 minutes, then I feel okay. I start an interval, not knowing whether it's 1 or 2 minutes. And he just goes, and he doesn't have to tell. And for the other runners, it's mentally very hard, because I don't know if the guy in front of me, if he's going to go for 1 minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. I don't know. But that's how it is in a race as well. So it's trying to think a little bit out of the box and do something more like accordingly to a race than always go by plan. And we do it in the forest, and we don't look at our watches. I think my watch this week set for the 50 minutes fartlek 3:52 average, which seems really slow for a runner like me, but it was harder than running 10K at 3:06 4 days earlier. So pace is very relative, also depending on where you run. I mean, if you run on a concrete road and it's 20 degrees, it's much nicer than in the forest with 400 meters of vertical when it's slippery and rainy. So you need to consider that into your run and to your paces.
Yeah, I know. I have to adapt it into my training, but I know it will be very, very hard. Maybe we can now move on to the World Championship when you run in Doha, because I think it is your I don't know if I can say that, but first big success in the world, because I remember that race when I watched it then on YouTube, and the temperature there was just awful. The conditions were even worse. So how do you remember that race? Because you ran, I think, 2:18. You were 31st. So I think on that conditions, it is just perfect. So it is like 2.5 years ago. So what's your opinion about that race?
A lot of good analysis here. You really got a good couple of points out of it. But it was extremely warm. I knew this. I know a lot of people complained, but nobody forced them to be there. If you didn't want to run in warm weather, you could have stayed home. It couldn't be surprisingly for them. I know it's terrible having a world championship in Qatar, especially for the marathon runners, because the track was cooled down at least. But nobody forced you to be there. It was an option. It was not mandatory or anything. So people should not complain about it. But I tried to prepare the best I could. A lot of people went to southern Spain, southern Italy, ran in a lot of clothing. But I went to Dubai on my own and ran there for 7-8 days before going to Doha, just because there was kind of similar conditions and I couldn't train in the sun because it would absolutely fry you. So I always went out for training in the evening at like 7 or 8 o'clock when it was dark, but it was still like 35, 38 degrees and very high humidity. I only trained once a day because it would be too draining for me to the last 2 weeks before the race to train twice. And usually I would train twice, but with these kind of conditions, I tried to save my body a little bit by only training once a day. Also because I would get to bed really late, then I could sleep in the next morning. And during the race, I mean, we were kind of lucky. For the women's race, it was much, much worse. The humidity lifted a little bit on the day the men ran, and I think we saw that in the times. The times were a little bit better in the men than the women compared to their PBs. Yeah, one of the things I did is just try to take in more water. You can take up about 1.1 liter per hour. And I mean, so there was no point of me trying to do 1.5 because it would just be too much for my body. But I should push towards that 1.1 liter just because it was very important. And I put a little bit of more salt in my energy drink so I could keep or bind the water in my body. Yeah, I went out what I thought was correct pace, and I found out that after like 15K, I mean, the guys were too far ahead. So I needed to speed up. And from there, I basically ran the last 26Ks just catching people. And it wasn't until the last 10K I really caught a lot of people. I was a little bit worried at 25 I wouldn't catch anybody, because in that 10K from 15 to 25 I only caught like 6-7 guys. But the last 10K I caught like 25 people. And yeah, I was seated 66th, and becoming 31st was really happy. I was thinking of 25, 30 on a good day, and so I nearly made that, and I'm very happy with the run I did. And I ran a negative split, like 110, 1:8, and 3 or 4 weeks after I felt really, really strong, just probably also because I didn't get heat exhausted. And my legs were, I mean, that's the one thing with the warm marathon. You can't go as quick as in a non-overheated marathon. So my legs felt okay after a couple of days. Made sure I couldn't have the same impact and muscle soreness. So that was probably very good. Looking forward to the next marathon.
I remember the Scotland runner Hawkins, who were fourth. He then told how did he prepare to the marathon in Doha, and he made the heat chamber when he ran in his home to prepare how the conditions will look like. So as you told, it wasn't mandatory. So okay, we can't complain about the weather conditions, but they were the same for all runners. And then I think another big run for your career was World Championship in half marathon in Gdynia in Poland. I spoke with Jake Smith. He was also there, and I live in Gdynia for 1 year. And when I saw the route on the of this race, I thought it will be very hard to run fast because there were some uphills, downhills, and I thought like, okay, it will be tough for runners. But then I saw that it was world record of women in marathon, in half marathon. So how do you remember that time and that strange race? Because first it was supposed to be on March, then it was postponed. So how did you remember that?
Yeah, we were taken really good care of in Poland, and with the COVID and everything, I was really happy that Poland made sure to organize this, and they did it in a good and proper way, and I felt safe all the way through. So good job to Poland for arranging this. And for me, the race, I was like, is this the best course you can find? I mean, come on. There's like 2 or 3 turns per 5K that are really sharp and a really steep downhill. And you couldn't really run fast on that. And then there's a long uphill. And I went out and tried to chase a PB of like, I wanted to run under 63, but no way. I ran like 64:10, and it was a really strong battle, and I was pretty pissed off with myself for a couple of days, and I didn't run for 2 or 3 days just because I was so annoyed.
That race was so fast. Like Christian Zalewski from Poland broke the national record, and he was like 31st, I think. Like really, the level of that race was so amazing. Like it was really pleasure to watch it, because also like it wasn't allowed, to be on the street and to cheer the guys, but of course everyone was there. So yeah, like, was it shock for you, that the level was so high?
I mean, I knew the runners I ran with were really good, but I'm in shock by how fast people ran that day, because the course was not. I mean, it was a decent course, but it was not a super fast course, and the weather was pretty good. I mean, it wasn't too warm, but I mean, it was not a fast course. So if you think we can do the World Half Marathon all over again on a flat course in Poland, everybody can probably go a minute faster, and that's insane to think about. Then Jake Smith would run 59:30, and Kiplimo would run 56.
It's like really hard, to imagine. So maybe now we are in last year. So it was Tokyo, and it was another race where you run, and another extremely hot temperature. So were you prepared for that conditions? Because when I saw your result, it was, I think it's quite hard, to say like you can be happy about that race.
It is definitely. It was. It was very warm. The conditions were rough. It was very humid, even though it wasn't. It was 29 degrees. It should be okay. I ran in Doha, but the humidity was really the factor here that killed a lot of people. I didn't have a great day. Even though I was seated 94th, I became 69th after one guy was removed from the list because of doping. And then I think I could have done better than that. On the day itself, I couldn't, because then I would have done it. But I think with my PBs in shape and the runner I am, that's smart and really good at making good decisions in races, I think this could have been a very good race for me. But I didn't. I became sick in June, and it never started clicking for me again before the race. And I was struggling quite badly leading up to the race. And then the first 2 bottles were not there for me. So I had to improvise with the bottles, and it ended up being quite a bad mess where I had stomach cramps and severe dehydration. So, not what I expected of it, but I went all in my training for trying to become top 25. And today I know that I'd done everything I could. Maybe I did too much, maybe, but I think it's better trying to become top 25, which was my goal, and training for it like that, than doing less and then maybe be 45th, knowing the rest of your life you maybe could have done more. So it wasn't the race I extremely hoped for, but it's probably the marathon I'm the most proud of, or maybe even the race I'm the most proud of, just because when I couldn't even see how I could run 500 meters when I had 10K to go. I didn't know where I was. And I even, with 10K to go, I started walking into the team tent, and then I ran out again because I know a lot of people were cheering on me, but I didn't know how I would make the finish line because I felt so ill. So I'm really proud of myself for finishing a race where so many people dropped out and where the conditions were so tough. And I have a hard time believing that I'll ever feel that much pain again.
It was the toughest run, the toughest race you have ever participated in?
Without a doubt.
Okay, and how many times did you want to, to drop off and, just to see DNF after your name?
Oh, if it wouldn't have been for the Olympics, I probably would have dropped off. No doubt about it, really. But it was the Olympics. It's maybe a once in a lifetime, and unless you're hurt, you don't drop out. So that's what kept me going. It was all the people who had motivated me throughout my career, all the people I knew who were sitting at home and watching, and I couldn't let them down unless I had a good explanation. And stomach cramps, going to the toilet, and feeling dehydrated was not a good enough excuse. Yeah, if I passed out on the street, that probably would have been okay then. But no, I couldn't even. I didn't know how to run 10K. It was literally like one step at a time, and I was 100% sure I was the last guy finishing, but luckily enough, I wasn't.
So huge respect for you, to finishing to the finish line. So next Sunday is a Seville Marathon. So I think it's really good race and for you to remember, because in 2020 you ran your PB on marathon. So can you just say something about your preparation to that race? Because is there anything special about that preparation and that time? Because it's really, I can say that it is a world-class result. So can you tell us a bit more about how did you prepare to that run? How long did it take? And maybe some special blocks you have run?
Right after the Doha Marathon, the World Championship, I wanted to try to qualify for the Olympics, and I decided it would be Seville because I heard it was the flattest marathon in Europe, and it was a really good time in February because if I didn't get the qualifier, then I still had a chance to go again in May maybe. I started training quite a lot for probably 3-4 weeks after Doha, so I started mid of November, so that's around 3 months prior to Seville. And I started with just some basic trainings and a lot of training in the forest, and I did European cross. Then after European cross, I was very sore because it was a tough course in Portugal. And I took off for 3 or 4 days, just completely off, just because I didn't feel good. And then after that, I started training pretty hard. I mean, some of the blocks we did, I think the first block coming back after European cross was 7 by 2K. I was like, my coach, did you write wrong? I thought it was 5. And he said, no, 7. 3 minutes per K. And I was like, I can't do that. No way. 7 by 2K, 3 minutes flat? No way. And he's like, okay, just take longer breaks. So I ended up taking 3 minutes of walking between each rep just to keep the pace. And yeah, then I ran a couple of, around Christmas, I did a lot of longer runs. I did a 35K and a 40K. I went to France and ran the 10K in Houillet. And I ran a 28:50, and it was a huge PB on the road with 35 seconds, and I was pretty amazed by how strong I felt and how good I did. So that kept me really motivated. So right after New Year's, I went to Kenya for a month, and training down there, my coach usually says it's important to train a lot around marathon pace, but because this one was going to be so much faster, we knew the pace was going to be 2:11 pace. I tried to train a lot on the pace I wanted to hit, so a little bit against my own thinking that you should adjust the paces to where you are in training and what you could run on the day. But I really had no choice, my coach said, for this one, because if I wanted to make the Olympics, it was important to go pretty hard. So I remember one of the sessions I did in Kenya on Tambach. It's a dirt track at 1900 meters. I did 15 by 1K with 200 meters of walking, so around 1.5 minutes of walking, and I averaged 2:59. That was in the last 3 or 4. I mean, I could barely hang in there, and the whole track was cheering for me because everybody could see, even the Kenyans were seeing how much I was suffering. But I went through it. I went home. I slept, and a couple of days later, we did another workout, and one of the workouts was 20k on a tarmac road, where I would go 1k at 3:05, 1k at 3:35. And keep in mind, this is at above 2,000 meters at altitude. So just around a little bit under marathon pace, and then about 20 seconds to 30 seconds over marathon pace. And those 20k in total ended up being like 3:13 average, which is really, really good for me in Kenya. And I knew that would translate really well. One of the last sessions I did in Kenya was 5k, 4k, 3k, 2k, 1k with Philipp Flieger from Germany, with like 1k of jogging in between. And I think for the 5k I hit like 3:10s, the 4k was like 3:08, and then I was really tired on the 3k. I ran like 3:11, 3:12, and I was like, oh, this is becoming ugly now. But then Philipp had gone a little bit slower in the beginning, and then he was ready to help me out, and I was just hang on to Philipp with everything you can. And then I think the 2k was like just over 6 minutes, and then the last k was like 2:54, and that was pretty much all out. And then some of the long runs were around like 35k at like 3:35. I traveled home 3 weeks prior to Seville to Denmark, and 3 weeks before Sevilla exactly. I traveled home 23 days before the marathon, and then 3 weeks exactly before I did 3x7k on a tarmac road here in Denmark with my coach on the bike, trying like fluid intake and training to a specific pace. And the first 7k I ran like 3:06, the next one 3:05, and then the last one I ran 3:02 average, and I was like, okay, this is really great training, and I think I'm about to be ready for this race. So after that, I went down, and it was quite unusually. Usually I do 2x10k 8 days before the race in marathon pace, but my girlfriend was supposed to run Barcelona half, and I thought, okay, maybe I can use Barcelona half 1 week prior to Sevilla as a workout. 10k fast, 1k jog, 10k fast. That's half marathon. And she ended up being injured, unfortunate, but I still managed to pace some other Danish guys because they wanted 3:06 pace, so it was good for me to not go too fast in the beginning. So I ran 3:06 for the first 10k, then I jogged 1k in 3:45, and then I ran 30:45 for the next 10k, and I finished. I didn't have an official bib, don't tell the organizers, but so I pulled off the course with like 100 meters to go. So that would have been a half marathon. I think I had 65:50, and I was like, if I don't have to jog in the middle, I think I'm ready to go 65:30 in Sevilla. So that gave me a lot of confidence, and it felt really, really good. I think you can push yourself, and you can run yourself into the ground, but if you do 65:50 with a k of jogging for a half, and you feel really good, I mean, I think even my second to last k was like 2:54, just because I still felt great. I knew, okay, just easy now, don't do anything stupid. So I was really confident before Sevilla.
So the race in Sevilla, the marathon in Sevilla, was special for you, or just, it is just, from the beginning to the end, that you have the right pace and you will just follow the rabbit and, till the end?
Eventually we only had one rabbit. It was like, oh, that might become tricky. But we had a good group of like 25 people all going for sub 2:11:30, and the pace was going to be 2:11. So just went with the pacer. He was smart. The first 5k we were headwind, and he was like 15:35, and he was supposed to be 15:30. So he added just a couple of seconds, and that's no problem in a marathon. Then we got a tailwind, and he ran like 15:15, and I felt good. No problem going a little bit faster when you have a wind in the back. Some people like too fast, and then the next 5k were headwind again, and he just adjusted it perfectly. He did such a good job. He was from the NN running team. But the problem was like 25 guys trying to take a bottle at the same table. Miserable. And I think I ended up in the first 4 water bottle stations. I missed 1 bottle. And for the other 3, I ended up walking to get my bottle and then started running again. So I went to a full stop 4 times in the first half. And we passed, still in the group, 20 guys, everything flowing good. We had 65:23 halfway. So I knew this was very good, and I was just latching onto the group. The paces started pushing a bit towards 25k, like 3:02. I was like, ooh, it's 25 is early when you have to go 42. But I knew, okay, we have a good amount of seconds in the bank, and I was unfortunate at 27k. I felt like a stomach problem, and I had to go to the toilet at 28, and the group obviously didn't wait for me. I mean, that's not how running is. It's not like when a soccer player falls over, we stop the time. This is real racing, and nobody's waiting. The time keeps running. So I went to the toilet and made sure to try to catch the group. But the problem was that they were speeding up a little bit, and I just really couldn't catch the group. So the last, from 28 to 42, I ran by myself, and my coach was out there, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, she was there. And I felt absolutely horrible from 35. Most people do in a marathon if they race all out. But I could see, even though I felt worse and worse, I only lost like 1 or 2 seconds on my watch. And that was extremely motivating. Like if I would have lost a lot on my watch, I would be thinking, oh no, this is not going great. But I could see I went from 3:05 to 3:07, 3:08. And I felt miserable, but my times were still really, really good. And that I knew I was a little bit ahead of schedule. So, and I could start catching some people from the group who was dying in the last 4 or 5k. So that motivated me. And that last kilometer, when I knew this, I have it. It's in the pocket now. It was just, it's those 3 minutes I will never forget. It's you get goosebumps on your arms. You're so happy. Okay, just don't do anything dumb now. Make sure you get to the finish line and maybe shed a little bit of a tear at the last couple of meters. So had to sprint a bit to get under 2:11 though, but that was alright.
Yeah, I have to ask you, because what did you feel when you ran with such time? Because running is so important in your life. Okay, maybe it's not the whole life for you, but it's a very important part. And then you ran such a wonderful time. So how did you feel after that?
I think I was so, during the race, I was so focused on just trying to do well for the next kilometer, and then the next kilometer, catch the next guy. So I wasn't thinking too much about what was going on. If I would have realized, I might have been close to breaking 2:11 and going to the Olympics, maybe too many thoughts would have come into my head. So I tried to focus on 1k at a time. One more, you're not there, one more. Just keep going until 41. Then I knew, okay, now I think it's safe to say that I got it. And then afterwards, it's just pure happiness. I mean, I remember I was in the elite area that was kind of like fenced off, and there's a guard waiting. And suddenly I see my coach. He's like 62 now, and he comes running. This old man with 2 fake hips. He comes running all he can, sprinting towards me, and he has 2 guards with those yellow vests behind him, and they can't catch him. And he was just, you could see how happy he was, and gave him a big hug, and went out, found my girlfriend, gave her a big hug, and then my good friend called me, and it was such a great day. I mean, I was so happy, and and I think it was worse for my girlfriend than me, because she's been anxious and nervous for 2 hours and 10 minutes, and we went back to the hotel, and she took a nap, well deserved, and I answered messages and calls from all the newspapers. It was great. I enjoyed it a lot, and made sure to go out and party that night in Seville.
So I have to tell that Spain is really good for you, especially about running, because this year the Valencia was also like a really, really nice run. I really regret that I wasn't there, because I was running the half marathon last October, and it was first time I ran 69 minutes, and I was I think 94th, something like that. So imagine with that result, I will win, I think, almost every run, I think, in Denmark, in Poland, and in Valencia. I was, I think, 8th or 9th in women's half marathon. So the level was so high. So if you can something more about 10K race, because the level was also so high, but you run a really, really nice race.
Yeah, so far the only race of 2022. I mean, I decided to run after New York. I decided to take a little bit off, and then I started training in December. So this race came after 5 weeks of training, and I knew my shape was good. I felt strong, and I decided to have an attack on the Danish record, which was 28:25 on the roads. So I went out really flying out the gate, and I probably was in the fourth group, and we passed 5K in like 14:10. And so many people, and the courses in Spain are usually very, very fast and very flat, and only few turns, and they're not sharp turns. You kind of like roll through them like a roundabout, and yeah. So I could feel at 6K I was starting to hurt, and I thought that I can still get the record, just keep pushing. And then some people dropped off, and I ended up dropping off the group, and yeah, just tried to push myself the entire way, and finished in a 28:38, which was a new personal best for me, and 13 seconds shy of the Danish record, but I think it's within reach, and I really hope I can get it in the future. And I think I was 25th or something with 28:38, which is kind of crazy to me, but it's a very, very high level, and it's really fun to be part of these races. It was a little bit windy as well, though, but not everything can be perfect every time. I think that's important to imagine or remember. And also when you train, once in a while you train in a headwind, and you do that because not every race will be like that. And if you know you can get through those workouts in training, then you also know that you can push hard when there's a little bit of wind in a race. It's just the way it is.
So maybe getting to the finish and to the end, there was an article on Bieganie.pl, I think the most popular website about running in Poland, that you are the fastest medicine student in the world. So if you can just talk about how does your study look like, and is it hard for you, to study, to run, and just to tell something more. How does it look in Denmark?
Yeah, I think actually there might be one person faster than me who studies medicine, Martin here from the US. He's 28:10 and 61 high or 62 low, and has 2:09 for the marathon. But yeah, we should put up a race in medical students against each other. I don't know who the fastest doctor in the world is. We'll have to find out and do some research on that. But that's definitely a title I aspire to be later on. But I'm grateful that the University of Aarhus will let me do my semesters a little bit slower than everybody else. Currently, for the last 2 years, when I have a semester at medical students, instead of using half a year, they allow me to use 1 year. So basically, instead of taking my master's in 3 years, it's going to take me around 5 years, 5.5 years. So I'm really grateful that that's a possibility. And I think full-time study would be very tough on my running. It's possible. Yeah, I just got to down prioritize other things in life. But I also want to still keep seeing my friends and my wife and family and be social. So I think with like full-time running and then half-time medical student and half-time social and family. So I think it's very nice of the university to let me do that, and it's very beneficial to me to have something from my head as well, next to doing all the physical activity every day. And I think it's also good for purpose of when you have a bad race, you have something else to think about, or if you have a bad exam, you have a new race to think about. So they kind of help each other.
So we can say that you are a forever student, yeah?
Yeah, you can kind of say that. I started I had started 2.5 years in the US, and now I studied for 8 years in medical school in Denmark. But I think I'll finish in 1.5 years. So then it's time to go practice and become a real doctor.
I hope so. So it's really nice, to be the fastest runner, the fastest student in medicine. But the oldest would be not so fun.
No, maybe we can play it off by that I'm young of humor and young of soul, and then we'll forget about the age. It's just a number.
It was really nice to meet you, to find out your philosophy about running, and I really, really like it, because I like to learn something from my guest, and you are definitely the person I can learn very, very much, and especially I have to say that I didn't look about the list of questions I wanted to ask you, because the flow of our talk was so nice that I didn't have to. So I think like it is the best thing I can say about the talk. Like if I did not have to look at the questions. So Thijs, it was really nice to meet you. So maybe next time after Paris, we can have another podcast, and you will also tell us what happened to your studies, what happened to your philosophy of running. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me on, and we'll definitely do that after Paris, and maybe I'll be in Poland for a race. Who knows? Maybe they invite me now that I'm on a Polish podcast. So you have my email, so they can contact you and you can send them through.
Yeah. So, but next time you will be in Poland, I hope that the course will be better than in Gdynia.
Yeah. Otherwise, we have a fight for position. That's also fun once in a while. It's not always about time.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode. I'm so happy that you reached to this moment. Please share this episode on Instagram, share it on Facebook, comment it on YouTube. It really helps me to reach other listeners, so it's very, very important for me. And if you want to support me financially, go to Patronite. You can find links in description of this episode. And what's more, till next Friday, because next Friday it will be episode in Polish, and it will be episode with Radosław Dudyk.